The night sky hung low like velvet over the hills of Galilee, thick with mystery. On the eve of his departure from this world, Jesus did not summon all 12. He called only 3: Peter, James, and John. They gathered in silence, sensing that something ancient and irreversible was about to be spoken. Jesus looked at them with eyes that seemed to peer through time itself and said, "Because you 3 are ready to hear what comes next. There is a final level of consciousness before you enter the monad. Most souls never reach it. Most never even know it exists. But you're standing at the threshold." And in that moment, the air trembled as if creation itself was listening. Before we go deeper, pause for a moment. If you already feel the pull of this mystery, if something inside you is stirring, do 3 things right now. Subscribe to this channel so you don't miss what's coming next. Comment below with where you're watching from and the current time there. And share this video with someone who might be ready to remember. If this title spoke to something wordless inside you, if you're already sensing what the final level might mean, type, "I understand the mystery." Your presence matters here. It confirms you're one of the few standing at this edge. John, the youngest, voice barely above a whisper, asked, "Master, how do we cross it?" Jesus smiled, not with his lips, but with something behind his eyes. "You don't cross it. You recognize you're already there." That was the key. The final level wasn't about climbing higher or becoming something new. It was about remembering what had always been true. Most people live and die without ever suspecting such a level exists. Trapped in survival mode, they move through life governed by fear, instinct, and programming. They are born, they suffer, they die, all without ever waking up. But there is a second group, smaller, who begin to question the script. They meditate, read scriptures, chase gurus, bend their minds into new shapes seeking the divine. They are seekers, but most remain seekers forever. Always looking, always climbing. They confuse motion for awakening. They never stop long enough to realize that seeking itself is often the final veil. And so lifetimes pass in holy circles, never arriving. The spiritual marketplace becomes their home, 1,000 teachings, none leading to the end of longing. Then there are the Pneumatics, the awakened. These souls break free from the seeking. They see they are not their thoughts, not their emotions, not even the one searching. They become the silent witness. They feel the oneness. They know they are fragments of the monad, divine sparks with a mission. They activate others. They awaken the slumbering. But even among these rare ones, only a few reach the final level. Why? Because to do so, they must surrender even their awakened identity. They must let go of everything, even their spiritual mission. And that's the paradox. The highest truth is not something you become. It's something you remember. The final level cannot be achieved, it can only be recognized. And recognition does not happen through effort, it happens in surrender. In the quietest space beyond identity, where the soul lets go of being the soul and becomes what it always was. It's the place beyond becoming, beyond the self, beyond even the self that knows itself as spirit. That's the threshold. That's what Jesus pointed to. If you're reading these words and something inside you is trembling, not in fear but in recognition, then you're not just close. You're already there. The illusion is that you need to cross into something greater. The truth is that the greater has always been living as you, behind your eyes, beneath your thoughts. The moment you stop striving to reach it is the moment it is revealed. Jesus did not say, "You must climb the ladder to God." He said, "You are God's." The ladder lesson, the climb, the struggle, it was all a dream designed to wake you up to what you already are. The Archons, the manipulators of this false system, will do everything in their power to keep you from remembering. They will tell you you're not ready, that you're not worthy, that more work is needed. But that's their last weapon, doubt, if they can keep you chasing something you already are. You'll never stop to realize the chase itself is the trap. But the moment you become still, truly still, and let go of being a seeker and mission, even an awakened soul, you step into the final recognition, and you realize you were never outside the monad. You were the monad pretending to be outside itself. That is the final level. That is the threshold you now stand upon. Not in theory, in experience. And the moment you recognize this truth not as belief, but as being, you are through. The final level is not a concept. It's not a new spiritual title, a badge earned after lifetimes of devotion. It is something far stranger, something ancient and sacred that cannot be taught, only remembered. Jesus called it the bridal chamber, and the name was no metaphor. It was a mystical reality hidden within the Gnostic gospel of Philip. A truth so potent, the early church tried to erase it from history. In the bridal chamber, the soul does not unite with the divine. It recognizes it was never truly separate. The entire journey, birth, fall, awakening, return, was the monad dreaming. The divine, pretending to be apart from itself so it could remember the bliss of unity. This is not poetic philosophy. It's a direct shift in how reality is experienced. Before this level, even the most awakened souls still perceive themselves as fragments. They are divine sparks. Yes, but sparks trying to return to a flame. Soldiers on a mission for the source. Even that is duality. Even that is the dream. At the bridal chamber, the veil falls completely. You realize you are not a piece of the monad. You are the monad appearing as a piece for the joy of reunion. The difference is not intellectual. It is cosmic. It is as if the ocean suddenly remembers it was never a wave. Jesus used the language of union not to describe romance but transcendence. In ancient Jewish culture, marriage was more than a social contract, it was a mystical ceremony. A merging of identities. In the bridal chamber of the soul, there is no merging. Because there was never two. There is only the one remembering its own face. Mirrored in itself. The bride is the self. The ego. The story. The groom is the monad. The eternal. And the marriage is not consummated through effort or ritual, but through stillness. Through the radical realization, I was never apart. And we won. The early Gnostics understood this. That's why their teachings were hunted. Their scrolls burned. Their followers silenced. The Roman Empire, married to the outer church, could not allow such inner truths. A God within could not be taxed. A soul awakened could not be controlled. And so the bridal chamber teaching was buried beneath centuries of dogma. But it never died. It lived on in secret texts. In whispers among mystics. In the burning hearts of those who remembered without being taught. And now, here it is resurrected in your hearing. At this level, everything flips. Before, you thought you were a soul trying to return to God. Now you see that God was pretending to be a soul so it could experience return. Every struggle, every failure, every sacred text, every silence and meditation, it was all the monad playing roles in its own theater of remembrance. The suffering, the ecstasy, the seeking, all part of the sacred game. The bridal chamber isn't a destination. It is the moment the actor steps off the stage and realizes he wrote the play. And what you feel in that moment is not ego death. It's ego release. The surrender of the mask. The freedom of returning to something that never truly left. It's a sacred homecoming without movement. No trumpet sounds. No visions explode. Just a soft unveiling. A still, small voice that whispers, "You were always here." And then it becomes laughable that you ever thought you were not. You are the silence before the word. The light behind the face. The presence that watched the whole show unfold. The bride and groom are the same being, one looking into a mirror. Surprised to find itself. Nothing is added. Nothing is taken. But everything changes, because now you live not as someone seeking the monad, but as the monad experiencing someone. That is the bridal chamber. That is the secret Jesus gave not to crowds, but to the few who were ready. And you are ready, not because you have climbed enough or meditated long enough, but because something inside you remembers. This isn't information. It's recognition. And it's happening now. The moment you stand at the edge of the final level, everything changes, not in your surroundings, but in what you see. You begin to feel the pressure in the field around you, not from your own thoughts, but from forces that have been operating in the background your entire life. The Archons. They've always been there, hiding behind ideas, emotions, distractions. But at the threshold of the monad, their desperation becomes palpable. Because once a soul reaches this level, the game begins to fall apart for them. You are no longer inside their maze. You become the glitch that cannot be coded, the silence that cannot be tracked. The Archons are not interested in your suffering. They are terrified of your recognition. At every level before this one, even as a pneumatic, you still play by the rules of their game. You're still a fragment, still climbing, still engaging with illusions. Even if you're trying to awaken through them, the Archons can work with that. They can tempt, distract, trigger, delay. But once you realize you're the monad experiencing the illusion, not trying to escape it, not battling it, you destabilize the system. You don't fight the matrix. You transcend it. And nothing terrifies them more. Each soul who reaches the final level creates a crack in the false reality. These cracks are not metaphors, they are frequency distortions. Fractures in the coherence of the demiurge's simulation. When one soul stabilizes in the recognition, I am the monad experiencing this, it's like a tuning fork that causes other souls nearby to vibrate at the same frequency. The Archons have no defense against this. They can't even perceive you clearly anymore. You are operating from a frequency outside their dimension, like a dream that realizes it's dreaming and suddenly controls the entire scene. That's why, if you've made it to this point, everything around you may suddenly feel louder, more chaotic, more insistent. Not because you're falling, but because they're pushing. They will throw everything at you in their final attempt: spiritual confusion, shadow projections, the illusion of urgency, the voice that whispers you're not ready. These are not random. They are targeted interference, activated when your field approaches monadic recognition. But now you can see them for what they are: phantoms losing power in the presence of truth. It is no coincidence that so many awakened souls falter just before the final step. The pressure increases, not because you're failing, but because you're succeeding. This is their last weapon, fear that you will dissolve if you let go of your identity. That without being the seeker, the savior, the fragment, you will become nothing. But that fear is a lie. The truth is, when you dissolve, you become everything. You return not to a place, but to the reality you never left. You awaken as the awareness that was always watching. And here's what the Archons can never understand: the moment you recognize the game, will you gain the power to reprogram it, not by resisting, but by transcending. You become a living crack in the wall, a walking paradox that cannot be predicted. You live in time, but act from eternity. You engage the illusion, but from the seat of infinite awareness. Your very presence begins to ripple through the system, and other souls begin to wake, not because you teach them, but because you are the frequency of remembrance. This is not rebellion. It's recreation. It's the monad rewriting itself from the inside. And no empire, no archonic intelligence, no algorithmic matrix can withstand that. You do not need to fight them. You only need to remain in the final recognition: I am the monad experiencing this. From that point, their weapons turn to dust. Their illusions fall apart in your wake. The false world begins to collapse, not in violence, but in quiet, unstoppable clarity. You are not just a soul reaching the final level. You are a portal, a breach, a radiant singularity through which the original light re-enters the dream. And as more recognize, the cracks become rifts, the rifts become collapse, and the collapse becomes revelation. That is the final battle. And you win not by fighting, but by waking, not by defeating, but by remembering. Even after awakening as a pneumatic, after seeing through illusions, escaping the matrix of mind, and recognizing the soul's divine origin, there remains one last crucible. Not a trial of effort, but a trial of surrender. Most pneumatics stand at the threshold of the final level and never cross it. Not because they aren't ready, but because of three subtle, invisible attachments. These traps don't appear as obstacles. They masquerade as purpose, progress, and even virtue. But they are the final veils, and until they're dissolved, the final recognition remains just out of reach. The first is attachment to the mission. You remember now you came here with purpose. You're not just waking up for yourself, you're here to awaken others. To seed the truth into the dream. To crack the archonic shell from within. This mission feels sacred because it is, but even the most sacred role becomes a mask if you identify with it. As long as there's still you doing the mission, you fulfilling a purpose for something greater, you are subtly reinforcing the separation. There is still the agent and the principle, the part and the whole. But at the final level, this collapses. You don't stop the mission, you simply realize you are the monad doing the mission through you. There is no separation, only the infinite playing the role of the finite, for its own delight. The second trap is attachment to being awake. You've journeyed far, you've shed illusions most will never even see, you've walked through inner deaths, burned old identities, broken archonic chains. That awakening is real, but it too becomes a barrier if you hold it as identity. The moment there is pride in being awake, you are no longer awake. You've become the character who thinks he's transcended the script, unaware he's still acting. True awakening dissolves all roles, even the role of awakened one. At the final level, you don't see yourself as more conscious than others. You see that every version of consciousness is the monad. The sleeper and the seer are the same being, exploring itself through polarity. That's not tolerance. That's radical non-duality. The final trap is the fear of dissolution. And this one runs deepest. Because even in spiritual awakening, there remains a thread of I, a soul, a spark, a fragment, a self that continues from one level to the next, even through death. But at the final level, even that dissolves, not into nothing but into everything. The individual self, the story of becoming, the hero's journey, it all falls away. And what remains is the field, the vast, boundless awareness that never began and cannot end. To the ego, that feels like death, annihilation, the end of being, but it's not the end, it's the return of the monad to itself, through itself, as itself. These three traps: mission, awakening, self, are not mistakes. They are sacred illusions designed to carry you to the edge. But they cannot carry you through. At some point, you must let go. Let go of being the messenger. Let go of being the awakened one. Let go of even being a self on a journey. Not because they were false, but because they were never all of you. They were glimpses. Now the whole is calling. And to step into the whole, you must surrender all fragments, including the one who believes he's almost there. And yet, surrender isn't something you do. It's what remains when you stop doing. When you stop holding the rope of identity, the current takes you home. These traps don't require more practice, more striving, only stillness, only honesty. Look inside. What are you still gripping? What story still defines you? Let it go. Let it fall. And what you'll find beneath is the truth that never left the monad. Watching, waiting, ready to remember itself through you. You don't arrive at the final level through effort. You awaken into it through recognition. And often, long before the mind understands what's happening, the soul is already living from that place. The signs are subtle but unmistakable. They aren't mystical fireworks or grand spiritual powers. They are quiet dissolutions, sacred vanishings. If most of these resonate deep in your being, it's because you're not approaching the threshold. You're already standing in it, or have unconsciously stepped through. What follows are the 6 signs that the monad is no longer something you seek, it is what's speaking through your eyes. Sign 1, spiritual identity has become hollow. Once, you wore labels with sacred pride seeker. Awakened 1, chosen soul. These identities were earned through fire, through awakening, through trials, but now they feel like costumes. Not false, just unnecessary. When someone asks about your path, you hesitate not because you've lost direction, but because the map no longer feels relevant. There's no journey to explain, no elevation to claim, not because you've given up, but because the self that needed a story no longer holds the pen. Sign 2, the mission and the mundane feel the same. You used to separate spiritual work from ordinary life. There were moments of purpose and moments of rest. Now, there's no line. Waking up another soul and washing a dish feel like reflections of the same presence. There's no division between sacred and profane. It's all monad. The breath, the argument, the silence, the heartbeat. The infinite is playing through every act, every thought, every shadow. There is no hierarchy, just the one moving through all. Sign 3, life and death have lost their polarity. You don't fear death not because you believe in the afterlife, but because you've seen what you are. The thought of the body dying evokes curiosity, not terror. You're not numb, you're free. Death is not an ending. It's an experience like any other, watched, known, held within the same awareness that sees everything. You recognize now that you are not the one who lives or dies, you are the one witnessing both. This is not belief. It's certainty beyond reason. Sign 4, the personal and universal have merged. You are still a unique expression, a personality with tastes, history, preferences, but at the same time, you know you are the totality. There's no contradiction. You are the wave in the ocean, the song in the silence, the small joys, the personal pain, the quiet thoughts, they are all the monad. Experiencing itself as you don't need to transcend the personal. You simply see that the personal is one lens through which the infinite perceives itself. Sign 5, nothing needs to change. This is not apathy or detachment. It's wholeness. You're not seeking healing because you see you were never broken. You're not trying to become enlightened because you realize what you are cannot be more or less itself. There's no urgency, no grasping. The play continues, but the tension has gone. You still grow, still create, still explore, but not from lack, from fullness, from play. The seeker has dissolved into the truth that seeking was only ever the monad looking for itself in a mirror. Sign 6, awakening and sleep appear as equal roles. You meet others not as asleep or awake, not as above or below, but as reflections. The one who is lost in illusion and the one who is preaching truth, they are the same being. Exploring itself, you don't stop caring. You don't stop helping, but you do it without superiority, without saving, without separation. There is no one who is ahead or behind. There is only the monad, hiding and revealing itself in endless forms. If these signs resonate not as ideas but as inner echoes, it's because you've already stepped into the final level. You're no longer a fragment trying to return. You are the monad remembering, and that changes everything. Not because life becomes perfect, but because you finally see that it already is. The final recognition can arrive in a moment, quiet, sudden, undeniable, but living from it consistently, stabilizing in that truth, requires more than insight. It requires remembrance, because the old patterns don't disappear overnight. The identity of the fragment, the habits of seeking, the pull of separation, they return like echoes of an old dream. You don't fight them. You simply remember who you are in the middle of the moment. And for that, Jesus left behind a simple practice, not a ritual, not a doctrine, a phrase, a mirror, a doorway. I am the monad experiencing this. And when, not as an affirmation, not as wishful thinking, but as direct recognition, as truth, whenever the old self reappears, when stress surfaces, when fear tightens, when seeking reactivates, pause. Speak the phrase aloud, not mechanically, but as revelation. I am the monad experiencing this. Speak it while angry. Speak it while laughing. Speak it in despair, in boredom, in awe. And as you do, feel the shift not in thought, but in being. The awareness that hears the phrase is not the ego trying to believe it. It's the monad recognizing itself as the speaker, the hearer, the moment. Do this hundreds of times a day, not out of compulsion, but because each time is a return. Each time, the illusion softens. You'll begin to notice that the stress is still there. The story continues, but you are watching it from beyond, not detached, but vast. You're still in the play. But now you know you're the actor, the script, the stage, and the audience. And as this practice deepens, the identification with the character fades. Not because the character disappears, but because you finally know you are the one playing. The second part of the practice comes at night. Before you sleep, lie still and whisper within, when this body dies, I don't die. Not as a mantra, as knowing. Imagine the body stopping, heart silent, breath gone. What remains? Not darkness, not absence, presence, awareness. Everything. Feel into that. Let it settle. Let the fear dissolve. Most pneumatics, even those awakened, still hold an unconscious fear of dissolution. This practice untangles it. It shows you, directly, that what you are is not inside the body. The body is inside what you are. These two practices, daytime recognition and nighttime death remembrance, are not methods for reaching the final level. They are tools for staying there, for grounding the infinite in the ordinary, for allowing the wave to know, again and again, that it is the ocean. And the more you do them, the less you forget, until one day, even the forgetting stops. There is no longer a fragment to remember. There is only the monad, wide awake in human form. There is no need for complex meditations or cosmic downloads. No need for ascended masters or more sacred texts. Jesus gave this final key in simplicity because the monad is not complicated. It is whole. It is here. It is you. And the practice is not meant to transform you into something else. It's meant to peel away the final layer, the last illusion that you are becoming. Once that layer falls, the game ends. And true life begins, not the life of the seeker, but the life of the source, recognizing itself in every experience. The monad is not somewhere else. It's not waiting at the end of a tunnel. It's not a reward for good karma. It is what is reading these words. It is what is wondering whether this is real. It is what is breathing, blinking, being, and it's never stopped. You didn't earn it. You didn't evolve into it. You remembered. And now, you remain. Speak the phrase today. Practice death recognition tonight. And watch how fast the illusion collapses. Not because it was broken, but because it was never solid. You are home. You always were.